Welcome to the Recover You podcast. I'm Kylene.
And I'm Patrick.
We are a couple in recovery
from sex addiction
and betrayal trauma. Together, we share our story to encourage you on your journey. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Recover You. Kylene here doing a solo episode. Thanks to Patrick, who took over last week when I had a friend over. That was very nice and helpful. So today I thought that I would share a speech that I gave recently, a talk that I was asked to present at a women's group. And the topic was overcoming adversity. And so they reached out to me. So it was not specifically betrayal focused. It was just this idea of, you know, what is it that people that are able to overcome adversity, what do they do? And I was honored that somebody thought of me and invited me to speak. And so I was kind of thinking, gosh, what am I going to talk about? You know, it's interesting to share your story. I do it a lot publicly. I do it on this podcast, but this was encompassed in a slightly different way. And so I really had to think about, how can I share with depth, but also make it applicable? And I don't know that I hit all of those marks, but hopefully I did. And so I'll share that with you today. I may add a little bit, I may shift it a little bit here and there based on the fact that this is a podcast, but yeah, I thought I would share my talk on adversity. But before I jump into that, I want to invite you, if you are a betrayed partner, to join us in the Recover You Facebook group. It's free and the link is in the show notes. So we did have an old Facebook group. It was, it's no longer in commission. I do not have access to it, but we created a new one. That link is in the show notes. So I hope that you will join us there. And if you have any questions or feedback or topics that you would like us to cover in future episodes, please click the link in the show notes as well and let us know what you would like to hear. And we would like to personalize the podcast based on the things that you are experiencing in life, the questions that you have, so that we can support you most effectively. That's also a great way to use the Facebook group if you are a betrayed partner. I love when you hop in there and ask questions. It is a private community. People that are on your friends list, for example, cannot see that you have joined the Facebook group, and they cannot see if you post a question. Just the people in the group can see these questions. And if that is still a little too much, you can post anonymously. So it's a very good place to ask those questions. And I typically personally reply. And as the group grows, we can come around each other more as a community as well. So I hope that you'll join us there. Before the age of 10, I was inappropriately touched by a neighbor boy. By the age of 24, I had dropped out of college, was married, cheated on, and divorced. At 32, I was diagnosed with cancer. And at 34, I discovered my husband of almost 9 years was a sex addict. When I began learning about my husband's addiction, my world was shattered. Bits and pieces of trauma debris came up from my past and were floating around, getting all mixed up as I began to untangle the lies and try to figure out what the reality was for myself in my relationship. This betrayal to me hit harder than anything else I had experienced. It felt like all of my previous pain combined was just a drop in the bucket. Many of you listening right now may think, wow, that's a lot to go through. I can't even imagine experiencing that much pain. Others listening, however, may be thinking, you don't know the pain that I've experienced. That's it. That's all you've been through. If you're on either side of that, you're right. Pain is actually relative to the experience and the perspective of the person living it. Trauma isn't what happens to you. It's what happens inside of you as a result of what has happened to you. This is why two people can have the same experience and view it very differently. And what we choose to do in response to things that happen to us can either keep us stuck or can help us move towards healing and towards our goals. The neighbor boy could have stolen my innocence. Cancer could have stolen my strength. Betrayal could have stolen my confidence. And while in the midst of the pain, it felt like they had succeeded in stealing all of those things. Moving through each struggle one step at a time as I moved through healing allowed me to rebuild those parts of me, slowly creating a version of myself that is more whole, more healthy, and more aligned. So as I share today's podcast, the topic is overcoming adversity, and I'm so honored to talk about this topic. I know that many of you listening can share insights from your own stories, and there are so many avenues that we could go down, and the topic itself is complex and full of nuance. But I thought that today I would share 3 anchors that have helped me through my experiences and what I see help others consistently as well. Those are value, clarity, and courage. When we start with the idea of value, what I mean is understanding and knowing your value and your worth at a core level. A few podcast episodes ago, we talked about the difference between self-confidence and self-worth, and that may be a good companion episode to this anchor. When I dropped out of college and got married the first time, I was flailing in a lot of ways. I was seeking attention in the wrong areas and had no vision for myself or my career. And this allowed me to make some choices that were not in my best interest. The relationship with my first husband was very unhealthy. We were very, very much not meant to be together. And these were decisions that I made from a part of me that lacked alignment. While in many ways I was very confused at that time in my life, there was another part of me who did know who I was. Enough at least that it allowed me to move through all the pushback I received when I got divorced. I lost my church of 17 years because of that decision, along with most of my friend groups at the time because, well, they saw things differently. I knew, however, what my relationship was like and how toxic it was. I knew that everything was right between me and God, and I knew that the decision to divorce was the right one for me. I knew the truth that was my life, and I felt confident enough in who I was and in that decision to trust myself through that process. Now, this is a tough one, value, because many of us struggle with this core identity level of knowing who we are and trusting our intuition. And often it's relational experiences and traumatic experiences that can shake our confidence in ourselves even more. These painful experiences can bring up questions like, why did I make that choice? Was this my fault? I should have known better. What if I tried harder? So if we find ourselves asking these questions or we don't feel quite sure of ourselves, what can we do? I want you to consider this journaling exercise where you would answer the following questions. What outside of my accomplishments defines who I am as a person? What outside of my accomplishments defines who I am as a person? And secondly, what are the core values that currently guide my thinking? And or what are the core values that I want to guide my thinking? These might look like honesty, authenticity, family, faith. You can do a quick Google search for core values list and get a list of probably 50 to 100 words that are great values to align with. But what I want you to do if you find a list like that is to pull out 10 that really resonate with you. So you could look at the page, you could look at Google, and you could circle them, print them out, whatever works for you, write them down. 10 core values. But then I want you to itemize those even more down to 3 to 5. And in order of priority, the top 3 to 5 are the ones that are really going to help you make decisions as you move forward. And having this core values list is something that helps us evaluate when we feel conflicted about decisions. We can answer looking at this value list by going, does this choice align with my top values or not? And if it does, it may be a good indication that this is a good next step for you. If it doesn't, you now have that clarity. When we experience pain, it can often shake our sense of worth and value. And because of those experiences, can create a belief that now shapes how we interact with other people in the world. I'm sure many of you listening are recovering people pleasers, and I'm sure many of us dislike conflict. These are often parts of us that are shaped by the experiences we have in life. These patterns serve us well in the moment they are created, but later in life we may find we no longer appreciate how they're showing up. Let me give you a real-life example of how pain in our life creates a belief that manifests in subverting our own value. In a call with a client recently, she made the comment that she went out to dinner, and part of her really did not want to be there, but she suffered through it because she wanted to please everyone. So a little later in the conversation, I said, "So you have some people-pleasing tendencies?" And she said, "Oh, no, I don't think I'm a people pleaser." So I gently reminded her that she just told me that she had stayed out and did something she didn't want to do because, in her own words, she wanted to please everyone. "Oh, I guess you're right. Yeah, I did say that." So as we continued the conversation, I asked, and I may reword and condense this a little bit, I asked, "What happens if you don't please everyone?" She said, "Well, if I say no, and I don't have a good enough excuse or reason to say no, I think people will judge me." So I keep digging and I ask her what's underneath that fear of being judged. She shared, "Well, I would feel bad because I'm hurting someone's feelings, because I'm not doing something to please them." So I asked, "Well, what happens if you don't please someone or make them happy?" She said, "Well, I'd be rejected." So I asked, "What happens if you're rejected?" And she said, "Well, then I'd be alone." And I said, "Well, what happens if you are alone?" Now, this client had been sexually abused by her brother when she was young. Her dad was an alcoholic and her mom had passed away. So when her dad would leave the house, leaving them alone, she would be abused by her brother. So what we discovered was that she had a deep belief that said, bad things happen when I'm alone. So I need to manage everything around me and make everyone happy so they never leave me and I'm never alone, so that bad things don't happen. She was neglected by her father and abused by her brother. She was wounded by people supposed to love her. These kinds of experiences can lead us to have subconscious beliefs where we deeply question our own value. Did this bad thing happen because I'm not lovable? Because I'm not good enough? Now, listening to that story, we all know, of course, that's not true. That little girl was valuable, lovable, and so worthy. But painful experiences can create beliefs subconsciously that don't match what we know to be logically true. The power of healing work is that we can offer compassion towards those parts of us that have been wounded. We can remind those parts that were hurt how valuable they are. And when we engage in that healing work, we can face our fears and our limiting beliefs and begin to step into the identity we choose. As you begin thinking about this idea, I want you to remember these 5 truths. Number 1, you are not responsible for the behavior, reactions, or thinking of others. Number 2, you are responsible for your own behavior. So when you show up with integrity every day, if you can go to bed at the end of the day and say, I did my best, that's all you can do. Number 3, mistakes are okay when we take responsibility for them. Number 4, you are more than your experiences. In other words, negative things that happen in our lives do not have to become our identity. And number 5, you are worthy and valuable just as you are because you exist, and you don't have to accomplish anything for that statement to be true. When we stop taking responsibility for others, we take responsibility for our own lives and remember that we are so much more than the situation we find ourselves in. We can begin to rebuild our confidence, tap into our inner wisdom and intuition, and make decisions from a deeper place of authenticity moving forward. You are valuable. The second anchor is clarity. We can never move towards a goal if we don't know what it is. Once we know who we are, we can start to get clarity on where we want to go. In order to move through adversity, we must create a vision of where we want to end up. What does healing look like? What defines accomplishment? What does success feel like? If we don't have clarity, the goalposts may continue to shift. Once we have the vision, we need to hold it without compromise, not without compassion for ourselves and others, because this path is not linear, but without compromise. It didn't happen day one, but early on in my recovery from betrayal trauma, I knew that if I was going to go through the pain of recovery and open the door for reconciliation, the outcome better be worth it. Part of what allowed me this clarity wasn't just thinking, what do I deserve? It's what I defined as health. It's what I believe women deserve. It's what I believe all humans deserve. Knowing that, I was able to work through what boundaries I needed Patrick to respect. Essentially, what was required to remain in relationship with me. Things like getting into deep sobriety and recovery, for me, no relapsing, complete honesty, etc. Then, as he progressed forward in his recovery and we progressed forward in our healing, I knew that I wouldn't want to settle for just good enough, for survival. This process was painful, so painful. So I wanted a relationship that included safety, vulnerability, honesty, and intimacy that I could feel truly happy and content in. You've all heard the phrase now, hard now, easy later, easy now, hard later. That's something that we really subscribed to in our healing journey. We literally spent years working through our own limiting beliefs, pain, fears, insecurities, and vulnerabilities individually and as a couple so that we could heal enough to create the life we wanted together. Having clarity about the vision allows us to identify both what steps to take next, how we can get to that vision, and what roadblocks may get in the way. A few years ago, I sat down to do an exercise with a colleague, and she said she wanted to move forward in her business, but it literally felt like there was a wall in front of her and she could not see past it. So I shared with her, the wall is a part of you. And she replied, no, it's not a part. I pushed her a bit on this. She trusted me, and we dropped into a subconscious parts work exercise. Turned out the wall was a part of her. And as we moved through the exercise, she got to know the wall. Ask it, why is it there? How could we make it feel safe? And as we did this exercise, the wall got smaller. So small, in fact, that she could put it in her pocket. And now she could see her future and no longer felt like she was stuck with creativity or seeing forward and seeing the future in her business. Some other examples of how this may show up. If we say we want a safe, intimate, and vulnerable connection with a partner, but we feel weird sitting across from them holding hands or gazing into their eyes or receiving compliments from them, then there's a block that's going to hinder us from getting where we want to go. Or if we want physical romance, but we don't feel totally safe and relaxed in sharing our deepest fears and insecurities with each other, then there's a block. If I say I really want to live within a budget, save $200 a month, but I never sit down to review my finances, there's a block. I'm not sure if some of you have seen the video on social media where there are two dogs separated by a pane of glass and they are barking like crazy at each other. In this particular video, and you've probably seen other ones where there's like a fence, you open the fence and they stop barking. In this particular video, there's a pane of glass, the dogs are barking, and all of a sudden one dog on one side of the glass walks over. You notice that the pane of glass is it ends, and the dog has access to the other room that the dog is in. The dog walks past the pane of window, gets a drink, so he's on the same side as the other dog he was just barking at, getting a drink, and then he walks right back to the other side of the glass and continues barking at the other dog. I am very curious what the story was that dog was telling himself about what that wall meant. Because sometimes the roadblocks that keep us from going where we want to go are simply stories that we tell ourselves. The stories we tell ourselves do come from real life experiences, but when we carry the pain of the past, those stories are like clouded filters that don't always tell us the truth, or at least the full truth. About a month ago, I told Patrick that I trust him as much today as I did before discovery. And if you have listened to this podcast for any period of time, you know that years ago, that level of healing seemed absolutely impossible, and that we have absolutely had our ups and downs through this in order to get to that end goal. For the past 4.5 years, I've watched his mind, emotions, and behaviors completely transform because he was willing to dive in headfirst, do the work, heal himself, respect my boundaries, and support my healing through the process as well. Deep healing is a combination of practical steps like boundaries, communication, lifestyle changes, in addition to mental, emotional, and spiritual work to process the thoughts, emotions, and beliefs that arise from the pain we have experienced. When we take this comprehensive approach to healing that combines the external and the internal work, the results go much deeper and last much longer than if we try to avoid, deny, or choose the most comfortable route. So, where can we start if we struggle with a vision and clarity for the future? I want you to spend some time dreaming. Get clear on the end goal and determine what roadblocks may get in your way. Here's an exercise you can do at home. We actually do have a recorded meditation of this. I believe actually it's a previous podcast episode. So if that's true, I will link it in the show notes. But it is the vision of you in 5 or 10 years from the future. And I want you to do this as a visual exercise. And again, we have a recorded guided meditation for this, and I'll put that in the show notes. But the idea is that you're going to visualize this healthy, successful, aligned, confident version of you in the future. And notice how that person dresses, who she spends time with, what she thinks and feels, what activities is she doing, etc. After the visualization, you can take some notes about what was different about that life and that person than yours right now, your life right now. Those are going to be keys to begin working on. It's going to give you insights on things that are different that you can begin working towards. The third anchor is courage. Once we're solid in our core identity and value, and then we have a vision for the future, we need the courage to see it through. I can tell you one thing for certain. If we want to end up in a place that is different than where we are right now today, the path to get there will be uncomfortable. Our brains are literally wired for familiarity, and there's a saying, people will choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. The reason we don't all make it where we want to go is not because we aren't capable. It's because we're uncomfortable with the unknown. Discomfort will come anytime we choose to move through adversity. So we must practice getting uncomfortable in small, safe ways when we know it's moving us towards that goal, towards that vision, and towards that future. I remember working with a wonderful client. She and her husband had done a lot of work in their recovery for about a year before she reached out to work with me. And as we began combing through everything and working together to make sure that the foundation of their recovery was solid, she made the comment that sometimes it feels like we are going backwards. In other words, some of the pain was coming back up to the surface. So at the time, I used the analogy of a large wound with a Band-Aid on it. Betrayal was an extremely deep wound, and with the best intentions and with the resources they had at the time, they put a Band-Aid on that wound. I'm sure many of us know where this analogy is going. If we put a Band-Aid on a wound that needs stitches, so many things can go wrong, right? It can get infected. It can continue to bleed, causing us to lose more blood than necessary. It can cause us more pain, etc. So what we were doing in our work together was ripping off the Band-Aid, cleaning out the wound, and suturing it up properly so that it had the best chance to heal. She went on to be an amazing client because she dug so deeply. There was nothing she wasn't willing to face, to process, and to move through. And that doesn't mean that we didn't have sessions where she wasn't filled with doubt, but over time, she had a huge transformation because she courageously faced her fears, patiently moved through the steps one at a time, and painstakingly let us clean out the wound together. She came in with anxiety, depression, and uncertainty. And after our time together, she sent me a text sharing that she and her husband had a recommitment ceremony. And she said, "My brain just feels at peace and ready to build our future. We are both so happy we did this." And I shared how glad I was that she was experiencing the safety and benefits of the work that she had done. And she replied, "Safety for sure." All week, I was like, what was I thinking marrying him the first time without this? It's a very real thing that choosing healing means feeling more pain before feeling less pain. It can feel overwhelming because everything is new and uncomfortable. But what we see time and again is that those who engage in the inner work are able to experience deeper levels of freedom, connection, joy, and purpose in their lives. I'm going to read a short excerpt from a book called Holy Hurt: Understanding Spiritual Trauma and the Process of Healing. So to just set up a little bit of context for this excerpt, she's in a hardware store and she is she's procrastinating on some work that she needs to do for a podcast that she committed to. And so she is just sharing a little bit of her story here. And Holy Hurt is, it has to do with spiritual trauma, and the author is Hillary McBride. "I was there searching for a garden tool because I was afraid to pull on anything connected to my own experiences of spiritual trauma. I knew I couldn't write about spiritual trauma in any depth, couldn't read the research, tell the stories, or talk about the healing without touching the places inside me connected to it all. I was afraid to pull the thread because what if, at the end of it, there was nothing left? What would it cost me? What would I lose of what had been familiar, of what had kept me safe? I asked my therapist during our session that week if we could go somewhere new, somewhere I was so reluctant to go that I'd convinced myself I didn't need to go there at all. That was also the week I could finally sit down at the computer and begin to write. When my avoidance began to thaw, underneath it I found painfulness. Getting close to tender places allowed me to get close to my heart, and what I found was not only pain, but also courage and creativity. Numbing one meant numbing both." I thought that excerpt was particularly applicable to what we're discussing today. She talks about the fear of facing her pain because what would happen if she lost the familiar, the sense of the familiar that helped her to feel safe. And then she continued to share how having the courage to move forward and to face the fear actually allowed her to tap into her creativity as well. And we have to understand that when we avoid the pain that is necessary for healing, that we're also muting other experiences in life like joy and connection. When we have clarity on where we want to go, we know when to push through. Even when things are healthy for us, we may feel resistance towards them. This is why having that clarity and vision is so important. If we know that the discomfort we're feeling is moving us towards our end goal, then we are more willing to move through it. I remember when we went gluten-free in 2012, and you've heard me talk about this many times, I read a book that gave me some vision and clarity about the why I would want to try this and change my diet. But the first few weeks were overwhelming and so hard. Why? Because it was new. New is uncomfortable, even when it's good for us. I started having more energy and feeling better, and soon enough, the new habits of ordering and buying and cooking food without gluten became just as easy as how we lived and ate before. Now, I know that may seem like a little bit of a silly example considering everything else that we're talking about, but one thing I've learned is that the healing principles of life apply to everything and everyone across the board. Whether we have big T or little t trauma, whether we want to improve in business or relationships, the healing work is all the same. What does that look like? We have to identify the goal, who we want to be and what we want to accomplish. We have to identify the roadblocks. These are limiting beliefs, fears, thoughts, or other things that might get in the way. And then we have to have the courage to tackle them all one at a time. Courage is not the absence of fear or discomfort. It's facing our fear and moving forward despite the discomfort. Courage is actually something we have to practice. So you've heard us talk about where we are today. You know who Patrick and I are and have seen us and probably listened through many episodes how we have step by step created a new life and a new relationship, one that we are proud of. One that involves transparency, trust, vulnerability, and honesty. One where we laugh together and we spend lots of time together and we are best friends. While we never asked for this to be part of our story, we are thankful for the healing it has brought, because not only did it impact us as individuals and our relationship together, but it has also changed how we interact with everyone in our lives. I know that I view the world totally differently. It has helped me become a more deeply empathetic person. Healing has dramatically changed how we parent. We often say that we wish we had this information we do now a decade ago or more. The earlier, the better. Everyone listening to this podcast has experienced something. Trauma, setbacks, painful events, things that have happened outside of our control. And just because someone else's experience may have been different, or you may perceive it as worse, it doesn't mean that your pain is any less real. In spite of the experiences we have had, healing is possible. And while we don't always get to choose what happens to us, once we have new information or new tools and resources, we can choose how we respond moving forward. So my encouragement to you today is to get clear and confident in your value. Create a vision of where you want to go so that you have clarity. And practice taking your next steps with courage, one at a time, so that you can continue to move forward no matter what life throws your way. Every day is a new opportunity to choose health and freedom. Make that choice today, and we'll see you next week. Woohoo! If you're listening to this, it means you've made it through an entire episode. Part of recovery is spending time engaging in healing and self-growth activities. We are thankful that you chose our podcast to be one of those activities today. Make sure you reward yourself for that accomplishment. If you've enjoyed this episode or this podcast, we would love to hear from you. Please take just a few moments to leave a rating and review, letting us know your experience with Recover You. We not only love hearing how these episodes are helpful, but ratings and reviews help others just like you who are searching for recovery information and support find the podcast too. We can't wait to hear from you. See you next week.